Good morning, everybody, and welcome. If you joined us yesterday, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time today, welcome to the Stroke Assembly online in your homes. My name's Tony Banks. I'm Head of Conference and Events at the Stroke Association, and I'm also proud chair of the UK Stroke Assembly. Now, usually the Stroke Assembly, we'd be meeting in the summer at an event face-to-face where our stroke community can come together to connect, to access support, and to take action on stroke. And because of the coronavirus crisis we've all been living through over the last 4 months, we simply cannot meet in person this year. So just because we can't meet in person, it doesn't mean we can't still connect. And it doesn't mean we can't continue to take action on stroke. And I said, for those of you joining yesterday, you will have heard me, that it actually feels more important than ever before that we are taking action on stroke right now and continuing to come together as a stroke community. So join us over the next 6 weeks, and I hope you'll be part of our community moving forward, and you'll be able to access a whole range of sessions and speakers throughout the 6-week program that we've put in place for you. And today we're on to webinar 2 of our Staying Active week. Yesterday we heard from our CEO, Juliette Bouverie, and Eamon and Emma, who talked us through the Stroke Association's Moving Forward program. You'll be able to access all of our webinars online at stroke.org.uk/stroke assembly. Yesterday's session will be live today, so do go and check it out if you missed it, and pass it on to others that may find it useful as well. So over the next 6 weeks, as I mentioned, we've got a variety of themes. It's Staying Active this week. Next week, we move on to Taking Action, and following that in week 3, we focus on our research work. But today's session will be around 30 minutes long, and we'll get started with that in a moment. But before we do, it's important to say that this is your webinar, this is your event. So we want you to have your say and talk to us throughout. So use the chat function and introduce yourselves, connect with one another, and ask our speakers and presenters questions and share your experiences with them. We have Natalie from our events team who's with us in every single session. Morning, Nat.
Morning, everybody. It's great to be here again and to see some familiar faces on the chat boxes as well. If you're unsure where to write your comments, on the right-hand side of your screen, you should see a comment box. If you scroll down to the bottom, you'll be able to write your questions in the little text bar and select the arrow where I'll be able to read those for you.
Thanks, Natalie. So please do continue to chat in that chat box and have your say and tell us your experiences. And we'll get to the end of the session, and Natalie will relay some of your questions back to our speakers. And also, if you're on social media, please do share using our hashtag Stroke Assembly on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. We want as many people as possible to access our webinars. So do spread the word and get others to join if you think they'd benefit. So without further ado, on to today's session. I'm really pleased to be able to introduce Chris Larkin, Director of Stroke Support at the Stroke Association. And Chris is going to be interviewing Craig Pankhurst, who is a former international swimmer, a stroke survivor, and founder of A Stroke of Luck, a charity partnership the Stroke Association is very proud to have in place. So I'm going to bring Craig and I'm going to bring Chris on screen now. I'll see you a little later on, but please do enjoy today's webinar. And here we are.
Good morning,
Craig. Good morning.
Good morning, Chris.
To everybody that's out there, I'm Chris Larkin, as Tony said, and thank you, Tony, for the introduction. I'm the Director of Stroke Support for England at the Stroke Association. I've been fortunate enough to work at the Stroke Association for about 11 years now. And over that time, I've also been very fortunate to meet a lot of inspirational people, inspirational stroke survivors. And I think, Craig, we met last year. When you came to talk to us a little bit about A Stroke of Luck and your experiences. And so I'm really delighted to be here this morning to share your story and to talk to people a little bit about the work of A Stroke of Luck, your recovery from stroke, and then also how the Stroke Association and the Stroke of Luck are working together in partnership at the moment, which is quite exciting. So
Great.
But people don't want to hear from me. They're here to hear from you predominantly. And I thought, first of all, Craig, it would be great if you could talk to us a little bit about, your life, your experiences pre-stroke, really, and then I guess leading up to when you had your stroke.
Of course. Well, good morning, Chris, and good morning, everybody. It's been a real pleasure to be asked to do this session, and I hope that those watching get something from it. And I'd love to answer any questions that do come our way. Okay, so going back, I'm 41 years old now, but going back to when I was a youngster, I've always been heavily involved in sport. Sport seems to be kind of the epicenter of my life. And as a youngster growing up, like many young kids do, that's an embarrassing picture of me when I was about 14. Swimming was a major focus in my life. I focused on it so much that I dropped other sports like rugby and football to concentrate on being the best swimmer I possibly could. And I was incredibly lucky. I had some great coaches, an incredibly supportive family that were happy to get up at 4:30 a.m., take me to the pool so I could train, and go to school and take me to the pool again after school so I could train again. And ultimately, it culminated in me getting representative honours. I captained Scotland, in Luxembourg and in Athens. And yeah, I was an incredibly fortunate individual. Unfortunately for me, though, injury curtailed my swimming career. So I retired relatively young, in my early 20s. But no, I had a magnificent time as a sports person. Not that you'd be able to tell I was an ex-swimmer when you look at my body shape now. That has changed somewhat from the slim version that I was when I was younger. But ultimately, in the year 2000, I went off to university, studied sport and exercise sciences. Once I graduated, I fell into business. I'm not too sure how that happened, but it did. And ultimately, then in 2015, I started my own company, which was doing quite well at the time. I had co-founders. We worked incredibly hard to establish the organization. But then on the 28th of April, 2018, so just over 2 years ago, I had my stroke. So so it was a Saturday morning, about 6 a.m. I woke up. When I opened my eyes, the room was dark, as if I couldn't see. That only lasted for a very, very short period of time, a split second. But when light started entering my eye again, it was as if I was seeing the room rotate out of my right eye in one direction, and my left eye in a completely other direction. So it made me feel incredibly sick. So I tried to go to the bathroom. That didn't go so well because I just collapsed down on the floor. My wife got out of bed, knew that there was something wrong with me. Ultimately, I ended up in hospital. And a number of days and weeks later, it was identified that the cause of my stroke was a dissection to my cerebral artery. So I think I'm incredibly lucky and fortunate to have firstly survived my stroke, and then secondly have a level of recovery which I think is just extremely fortuitous. So I'm one of the very lucky ones.
Okay, thanks, Craig. And I mean, within a remarkably short period of time following your stroke, you obviously started to think about your recovery and ultimately have gone on to found A Stroke of Luck. I mean, are you able to tell people a little bit more about A Stroke of Luck and what motivated you to establish that charity?
Yeah, of course. So I mentioned at the time I had my own business. So over the summer months, it was quite clear to me that I wouldn't be able to. I was a co-founder and MD. I wouldn't be able to carry on with the kind of relentless work that I was doing, as lots of people do. But that wasn't going to be suitable for my recovery and rehabilitation. My occupational therapist knew at the time that asking me to do kind of nothing except for just focus on rehabilitation probably wouldn't support my recovery journey because I've got quite an active mind. So I made the decision over the summer of 2018 that I wanted to do something and wanted to make a difference to other stroke survivors' lives. In fairness, I was ignorant towards stroke before I had a stroke. I obviously knew about the Stroke Association, but stroke itself, I didn't know too much about. So I made it my mission to understand the new club that I was part of a lot better. And I felt that actually my experience as a former athlete and my degree in sport and exercise sciences and everything that I'm passionate about around sport and fitness, there seemed like a nugget of an idea to support people's onward recovery journey post NHS care with an exercise and activity program. So that thought process just kind of spiraled, and that was the concept then of a stroke of luck. That ultimately what we set the charity up to do is to support stroke survivors with their physical, mental, and emotional well-being post-stroke through the use of exercise and activity.
Brilliant. And I mean, you've touched on this a little bit, Craig, but kind of following your own experiences of stroke, how did you find the available support for you when you came home from hospital? Was there something about that kind of fed into this identification of a need for stroke survivors, particularly in relation to exercise, obviously?
There was, yeah. So I think my immediate discharge from hospital was excellent. I only had one physiotherapy session though, and that was about half an hour in the home. And the physiotherapist was excellent, but it was felt because of my knowledge around fitness and exercise that potentially I didn't need that resource. Luckily for me, I didn't need any speech and language therapy, but I did need a lot of occupational therapy. So I had a 12-week program, and then I was part of the acquired brain injury team. But ultimately, when that service provision stopped, I felt that it was over to me as a stroke survivor now to carry on the rest of my life. And I'm lucky I've got a natural positive disposition for life. I could cope with that. But there were lots of people on a lot of stroke forums that I still see are struggling with the acceptance of stroke. So that was the motivation for starting, is to try and support people through this journey of I've had a stroke, I now can't see a positive future for me. Well, let's try and support people's recovery journey through the use of exercise and sport and fitness.
Brilliant. And I think we know, at the Stroke Association as well, that gap between formal rehabilitation and therapy and physiotherapy and, services have got much, much better, thankfully, for people. But following on from that, it can be a huge leap then to get back into normal life, whatever normal life might be, or, back into the gym for exercise. Yep. Or, whatever it might be. And we know what a positive impact exercise has on people. It's a kind of wonder drug, if you want to term it like that, in terms of if you could prescribe exercise for everybody, we know that would have a huge benefit for anyone, not just stroke survivors, for anybody. It's one of those things that really does make a huge difference to both physical and mental health. So how do you see a stroke of luck kind of supporting stroke survivors to access exercise in the future? So
the original concept, and it remains our medium stroke long-term ambition, and I'll explain why it's medium long-term and not short-term, but I think it'll be quite obvious in a second. What I want to do is create a web platform. Think of it like a dating website. It's not dating, but think of it like a dating website where you've got one half of the web platform will be stroke survivors like me. I can register on the platform and I'll be able to interact with other stroke survivors. The other half of the platform is where experts and professionals will register and create their own kind of professional profile. What we want to do is have a matching between stroke survivors and experts. Now, it would be based on a means test and a needs analysis of the stroke survivor. But ultimately, a proportion of the money that comes into the charity will convert into a credit system, which will sit in the digital bank account of a stroke survivor. If they're approved for credits, they would then be able to spend their credits on an expert. If a survivor's got the cognitive capacity and physical function to do so, they can go into a gym environment. If it's within the gym environment, they want to spend their credits with an approved trainer to support them with their ongoing recovery journey. If it's not, then the expert will come into the home of the stroke survivor and support them on a one-to-one basis. Ultimately, what we were doing was going through a fundraising round to be able to build the web platform, because as you can imagine, it's not a cheap platform that we're creating. And then coronavirus crisis hit. So we made a decision as a board of trustees to say, well, it's okay for us to keep building this platform in the background because it will have a worth when the world gets back to kind of the normal that we're used to. But actually at the moment, right now, I believe stroke survivors are in greater need of support from the Stroke Association and a stroke of luck than ever before. Lockdown and potentially those that have been isolating or even shielding are really distanced from a rehab program. So I came up with a strategy to say, right, okay, what we're going to do is create, using a team of experts that we've got together, a library of resources for stroke survivors to use that they can dial into kind of online. So that's what we're busy doing, and delighted, you mentioned earlier, Chris, that we're working in partnership to do so. We're creating a pilot suite of stroke-specific exercise videos for stroke survivors to engage with whilst they're in their homes to support their ongoing recovery journey. And we've classified them into groups to make sure that they're appropriate, to make sure they're relevant for a stroke survivor's capability level. So that's how we adapted as a charity in the very kind of short period of time that we've been around. We needed to. It was on a needs basis, really, that we looked at current crisis and how can we best support other stroke survivors.
Yeah, so it is exciting to see the Stroke Association and the Stroke of Luck partnering on these films, and we know that there's a couple on YouTube, but with more to follow this week, hopefully, or very, very shortly. And then we'll be able to share those links with people afterwards, so that people can go online and see these, really accessible exercise films that have been created by skilled and expert professionals who work with a stroke of luck. People who have that knowledge of stroke. And I think that was a big gap, wasn't it? We identified there's lots of information out there potentially for people to exercise online. Joe Wicks has been getting the country doing their exercise at 9 o'clock every morning, and I've been down a few times with my son to do Joe Wicks and things like that. But for lots and lots of stroke survivors, the available content online isn't at the right level or isn't accessible in such a way. And that really was where we felt there's a gap there to modify the content so that it's really relevant for stroke survivors, and importantly, as wider range of people affected by stroke as possible, because as you touched on, Craig, people's disabilities and physical disabilities can be very, very variable after a stroke. And so we've worked together to try and make sure that it can be accessed by anybody, regardless of how severe their stroke has been.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's important. We will identify there's a whole spectrum of stroke survivors, those that are struggling with mobility at one end and those that have got good range of motion and good mobility other. And it's important what we're able to do is create activities that as many people can engage with as possible. And you're right to identify, there's a whole host of brilliant people out there creating a lot of exercise content, but it misses the mark for so much of our community. And that was the gap that, between the two organisations, we hope to fill as best we can.
Brilliant. Craig, I'm really pleased. We've had a question from someone that's watching and highlighting really how inspiring your story is, which I would echo. It is inspiring to hear that you went on to set up a charity within a year of having your stroke, and you were inspired to support other people. But what would you say to someone who has recently had a stroke? This person who's watching has highlighted isolation is a big concern right now, and it feels lonelier than ever for many people affected by stroke.
It's incredibly difficult. One of the things, and I'll be delighted for people to check out the Stroke of Luck website afterwards, but one of the concepts I came up with very, very quickly it's based around sport, and it's based around an 80s TV program that if you're a similar age to me, you may well have loved, called The A-Team. So I came up with an analogy soon after my stroke that I felt that my recovery journey, and it's probably even more important now, would be a much more positive experience if you have a support network around you, which I branded kind of my A-Team. And that A-Team is made up of friends, it's made up of family members, it's made up of charities, it's made up of medics and clinicians and anybody else that forms and has an interaction in your life. The most important part of the A-Team is the stroke survivor, and they become the captain of their A-Team. And what you need to do is identify those people that can support you, especially during these times in periods of isolation, that if you're looking for a pick-me-up, you're looking for a friendly conversation, choose somebody that's part of your A-Team that's going to give you that. If you're looking for pragmatic and logical advice, choose someone in your A-Team that can give you that. So it's for me, it was all about identifying the skills of people that are part of my support network and playing to their strengths. And once you've learned how to do that, I honestly believe your recovery journey becomes a much more positive one because you're breaking down lots of different barriers. I had an expectation at the beginning, soon after my stroke, that I was going to get all the love and sympathy in the world from absolutely everybody around me. And of course, people loved me. And of course, people gave me sympathy. But actually, what I also needed was pragmatic advice. I needed someone to give me a kick up the backside when I needed it. Tell me, you can do this. Kind of, if you're feeling a little bit sorry for yourself, that's okay. but also pick yourself up and get on with it. So for me, yeah, the biggest advice I can give is make sure you develop as big a team as you can as part of your support network.
Thanks, Craig. And I think I would just echo that. And I suppose one of the positives that we've seen come out during the coronavirus crisis has been that people are able to hopefully also reach out for support beyond their friends and family, and some people who might not be fortunate enough to have family at home, to online sources of support and peer support from other stroke survivors, and we've seen how valuable that can be. So I know there's a number of forums that you mentioned, Craig, but the Stroke Association's kind of My Stroke Guide website, which or platform that people can join, and being able to access those kind of forms of support and share your experiences. We've seen increasingly how important peer support can be for stroke survivors.
I'd agree. No stroke survivors on their own, so do reach out.
Thanks, Craig. And we've had another question from Emma. What advice would you give to a stroke survivor that's apprehensive about starting to exercise after their structured therapy has come to an end?
Firstly, speak to your clinician, speak to your expert to make sure that it is safe for you to go back into exercising. I wasn't allowed to for a number of months because, as I mentioned, I've got this dissection to my artery. So I was under the care, and still am under the care of the Walton Centre, so a neurologist there. So I didn't go back into a gym until it was agreed by my medics that I could do so. So that's absolutely the most important thing, is you get the sign off from your medics. The second thing is, don't push yourself too much. Just start with some gentle activity, whether it's walking, if it's cycling, if you've got the coordination to do cycling, but something very, very gentle to build your confidence, because I completely get it. I do understand that, the first minute I walked into the gym, I was shaking. I was really shaking with anxiety, thinking, what could happen to me? I got the certificate, so I gave that to the gym to say I could go in, but I absolutely was anxious. And don't be afraid of that. It's a natural reaction, but just make sure you go through all of the steps that you need to. As I say, the most important one being getting sign off from your medical team. And when you do, go into a gym, have a conversation with the personal trainers there, the gym owner, if it's a small gym, talk to them about your particular situation. And I'm almost certain they'll welcome you with open arms and really support you around confidence building as well.
Thank you, Craig. And in due course, make sure that you visit a Stroke of Luck's website, because there'll be potentially opportunities through there to become aware of where there are stroke specialist exercise professionals across the country. And I think we also know that there are a number of kind of accessible exercise schemes available across the country. So, asking your medical team, like you say, or the rehab team, and also potentially someone like the Stroke Association's helpline, for advice about services in your particular area that might be that bridge between therapy and the regular gym. Yeah, really good advice, Craig. Thank you.
Okay.
So Mike has asked a question highlighting that the emotional impact and depression in particular is common after a stroke, and asking, Craig, have you struggled with this after your stroke?
A little. So once the occupational therapy team had kind of spent time with me, and I'd had 12 weeks, I was then referred to the acquired brain injury team. So they did, and I don't know whether Mike's had these tests done, but I had a series of questions that I was asked by the therapist, and one was around depression and one was around anxiety. And my depression score actually came out not too bad, so a little bit of depression. What I suffered horrendously with, though, post-stroke, was anxiety. So things that I never found myself being anxious about, all of a sudden, I was incredibly anxious about. So depression wasn't something that has affected me. Anxiety certainly has. So I can talk from a place of knowledge around that and what I do to overcome my anxiety. So by all means, get in touch with me, kind of after this session. I'd be happy to respond and engage and talk through my experience a little further.
Thank you, Craig. Thank you. I'm just going to now check with Natalie to see if we might have any comments from the audience at all.
Hi, Chris. Hi, Craig. Thank you very much. I'm just having a look through the chat box. We've had some really nice comments from Emma in particular. So it sounds like an excellent way to provide a service. I'm really looking forward to seeing it in action. We've had a really nice one from Gary. So before I had my stroke, I was very active, cycling, swimming and running. I would like to thank Craig for his talk. I am 6 months into my recovery and I was beginning to doubt my return to an active lifestyle. So some really nice, impactful comments there that I think have really benefited from listening to Craig today. We've had some really nice sort of from James as well. So he asked our stroke tool, My Stroke Guide. There's lots of different videos on there. So James is referring to one of his friends who suffered a stroke who found that really useful as well. But at the moment, if anyone's got any more questions they'd like to ask Craig and Chris, feel free to drop them into the chat box.
Thank you, Natalie. And we can always come back to those if they come in at the end. Myself and Craig will pick them up afterwards. So thank you for watching, everybody. I think finally then, Craig, I mean, I've seen you kind of speak a couple of times about your stroke. And I know that you've got the sort of analogy of a battery, I think, in terms of, in particular, dealing with post-stroke fatigue, which we know a lot of stroke survivors is something that they struggle with, and I think is something that you struggled with. In the kind of final minute or so, is that something you can just describe for people?
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, I could talk about it for a long time, but yeah, to sum up in a minute, the branding of a stroke of luck is in green, amber, and red, and I came up with this color. It's a very simple traffic light system to support. At the time, my 8-year-old. My youngest daughter was 8 when I had my stroke. So for her to assimilate what was wrong with me and what neurofatigue was all about via just the written word or spoken word, it was nigh on impossible. So I came up with a traffic light system, and I talk about how I live my life through 3 different zones. When I'm in my green zone, like I am now, I can talk, I can walk, I can function pretty much as I could pre-stroke. Slight left side weakness and slight concentration deficit. As I move into my amber zone, my speech will slow down, my thought process will slow down, I may get words in the wrong order in a sentence, and my left side becomes more noticeably weak, so I'll walk with a limp. If I don't rest at that point, I then move into my red zone. And when I'm in my red zone, we could be having this webinar, you'd be speaking to me, Chris, I'd understand everything you were saying, but if I tried to articulate a verbal response, I would grunt at you at best. And if I tried to gesticulate a response, my right side would move slowly, my left side probably wouldn't move at all. So that's how I now identify as my neurofatigue. And I've come up with a strategy now called a diary management system, where all of my activities in my diary are classified as green, amber, and red activities. A green activity is one that doesn't deplete my energy reserves, an amber depletes it slightly more, and a red depletes it really, really quickly. So I make sure that most of my diary is filled with green, a little bit of amber, and very, very few red. So that's how I manage my neurofatigue. And just relating to the battery, ultimately what we're talking about in that infographic, and people do check out our social pages because we created a lot of infographics, is just the battery of somebody with an injured brain depletes at a more accelerated rate than somebody that doesn't have an injured brain. So it's just about making sure you understand your levels of fatigue and manage them appropriately.
Perfect. That was, I mean, I just think that's a brilliant analogy and a really good strategy that other stroke survivors might find useful. So I'm going to stop us there, Craig. It's been great to talk to you again. Thank you for joining us, sharing your inspirational story. And, you know, I think we all wish you every success with a stroke of luck. We look forward to continuing to work with you. And I'm going to hand back to Tony now to wrap up this morning's session.
Thank you ever so much, Chris. I really appreciate it.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Well, a huge thanks to Chris for hosting that session, and to Craig, of course, for sharing your inspiring story. And it was really nice to hear about the partnership between A Stroke of Luck and the Stroke Association, such an incredibly important partnership, and we look forward to working with you guys a lot more moving forward. That concludes today's session. Thank you everyone for joining us. We do continue the Staying Active theme throughout the rest of the week. So on Friday, we have our live exercise session, which you can join and participate in. It's around a 20-minute live seated exercise class hosted by Elaine. So she'll take you through all the things you need to know. All we've been told is that you need a chair and some space. That's all you'll need to participate. So please do pass the message on to those that you think might want to join and may benefit from joining our live exercise class on Friday. Also, tell us what you think. We want to hear from you. Are these sessions working for you? We'd love to hear your feedback. After every session, at the end of every week, we'll send you an email where you can give us your suggestions, and you can tell us what you'd like to hear of more in the future webinars that we've got coming up. So for now, thank you again for joining. Thanks to Craig and thanks to Chris, and we'll see you on Friday at 11 a.m. for our live exercise session. Goodbye, everyone.